500 knights against 25,000 soldiers. A 16-year-old king whose body was literally rotting away from leprosy, leading a suicidal charge against the greatest Muslim commander since the Prophet Muhammad. These aren't the odds where underdogs triumph. These are the odds where civilizations get erased from history and their stories become footnotes about empires that used to exist. But on the 25th of November 1177, at a desolate hill called Montgisard in the Holy Land, something happened that defied every law of military logic and changed the course of the Crusades forever. And here's what will shock you most. If Baldwin IV had lost this battle, there would be no crusader. Kingdom of Jerusalem, the Third Crusade would never have happened, and Richard the Lionheart would be a footnote rather than a legend. Picture this: a teenage king so ravaged by leprosy that his fingers were falling off, his face was collapsing into itself, and the pain was so constant he could barely sleep, yet possessing a strategic mind brilliant enough to see opportunities that veteran commanders missed. Facing him was Saladin, the sultan who had united Egypt and Syria, who had never lost a major battle, who commanded an army so vast it took hours to pass a single point. The mathematics were extinction level. The logic of war had already chosen the victor. But that scorching November day in the desert between Ramla and Ascalon, faith became a weapon more powerful than steel, and a dying boy proved that courage doesn't require a healthy body. To understand the impossible nature of what Baldwin IV achieved, you need to grasp just how catastrophic the Crusader kingdom's situation was in 1177. The Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, that fragile Christian state carved out by the First Crusade 80 years earlier, was collapsing. The great wave of European crusading fervor had long since ebbed. The powerful monarchs who once sent armies by the tens of thousands to defend the Holy Land were now consumed with their own wars back home. The kingdom's treasury was nearly empty. Its borders were constantly raided. Its lords spent more time fighting each other over titles and land than preparing for the existential threat gathering in the east. And that threat was Saladin Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, the Kurdish-born sultan who had achieved what seemed impossible, uniting the fractious Muslim states of Egypt, Syria, and beyond under a single banner for the first time in generations. Saladin wasn't just a military commander, he was a visionary who understood that Muslim division had allowed the Crusader states to survive for 8 decades. Unity would erase them. By 1177, he controlled resources. The Crusaders couldn't match the wealth of Egypt's Nile Delta, the warriors of Syrian cities, the religious fervor of jihad properly channeled. His ultimate goal was clear and openly stated: recapture Jerusalem, the third holiest city in Islam, lost to Christian invaders in 1099. Everything else was preparation for this divine mission. Against this rising Islamic tide stood Baldwin IV, crowned king in 1174 at age 13. Historians still debate exactly when Baldwin's leprosy was discovered, but by 1177 it was undeniable and advanced. Leprosy in the 12th century was a death sentence, wrapped in social horror. The disease caused by bacteria that attacks nerves and skin progresses slowly but inevitably. It begins with loss of sensation in extremities, making injuries go unnoticed until infections set in. Then comes the visible decay. Skin lesions, facial collapse as cartilage deteriorates, fingers and toes literally rotting away and falling off. The pain is constant and agonizing as nerves die. Medieval people believed leprosy was divine punishment for sin, making sufferers social outcasts to be feared and avoided. That this afflicted teenager sat on Jerusalem's throne was scandalous to many. How could God allow a cursed leper to rule the holiest Christian kingdom? But behind the decaying flesh was a mind of startling brilliance. Baldwin spoke fluent Arabic and understood Muslim culture intimately. He read military histories and studied tactics. Despite constant pain that would have broken most adults, he attended council meetings, made judicial decisions, and maintained iron control over fractious nobles who might otherwise have torn the kingdom apart in civil war. His greatest strength wasn't physical, it was strategic vision combined with absolute refusal to surrender to his disease or his enemies. By late 1177, Baldwin had been king for 3 years and had managed to maintain an uneasy truce with Saladin through a combination of diplomacy, defensive fortifications, and calculated displays of strength. But in November 1177, Saladin decided the moment had come to end the Crusader kingdom forever. The Sultan assembled a massive army. Chroniclers' estimates range from 20,000 to 30,000 soldiers, though 25,000 is the most commonly accepted figure. This force included Egyptian heavy cavalry, Syrian warriors, Bedouin light cavalry perfect for desert warfare, and thousands of infantry. Most critically, Saladin's army was unified, disciplined, and commanded by a military genius at the height of his powers. The invasion plan was elegant. Cross the Sinai Desert from Egypt, strike north along the coastal road, overwhelm the southern fortresses before they could coordinate defense, and march on Jerusalem before winter made campaigning impossible. Saladin calculated correctly that the Crusaders expected any major invasion to come from Syria in the east, not Egypt in the south. By the time they realized what was happening, it would be too late. In early November, Saladin's vast army crossed into Crusader territory like a human flood. Border settlements were overrun. Refugees fled north with tales of unstoppable Muslim forces burning everything in their path. Inside Jerusalem, Baldwin's council convened in near panic. The young king sat listening as his advisors argued, his bandaged hands resting on the council table, his face impassive despite pain that never stopped. Some counselors urged immediate retreat behind Jerusalem's massive walls, let Saladin besiege them while hoping for relief from Europe. Others advocated abandoning outlying territories entirely and consolidating all forces in the holy city itself. A few simply despaired, suggesting negotiated surrender might save Christian lives, even if it meant losing the kingdom. Baldwin listened to all of this, then spoke in a voice that was quiet but cut through the debate like a blade. If we hide behind walls, Saladin will besiege us and starve us until we surrender or die. If we abandon our southern fortresses, he will take them without a fight and march on Jerusalem unopposed. Our only chance, however small, is to intercept him before he reaches Jerusalem's gates. We march south to Ascalon. The room fell silent. March south? Toward the enemy? With what army? Baldwin's available forces were pathetically small, perhaps 500 knights total, including the Templar garrison at Ascalon, plus a few hundred infantry and support troops, against Saladin's 25,000. The odds were 50 to 1. It was suicide. But Baldwin's strategic calculation was ice cold. Ascalon was the key fortress controlling the southern coastal road. If Baldwin could reach it before Saladin, he could block the invasion route and force Saladin into a siege, buying time for reinforcements to arrive. If he stayed in Jerusalem, Saladin would simply bypass the smaller fortresses and arrive at the holy city's gates with his entire army intact. The choice was between certain doom later or possible doom now. Baldwin chose to fight. The night before departure was frantic. Messengers rode through November rain to every loyal garrison. The king marches to Ascalon. Join us, or Jerusalem falls. Arms were distributed. Horses were saddled. Priests heard confessions from soldiers who knew they might never return. And in the royal chapel, Baldwin knelt before the true cross, that most sacred relic, supposedly made from the actual wood of Christ's crucifixion, and prayed for strength his body no longer possessed. At dawn, on the 21st of November, 1177, Baldwin rode out of Jerusalem's gates. The sight was simultaneously inspiring and heartbreaking. The young king, visibly sick, wrapped in armor far too heavy for his wasting frame, led a pitifully small force against an empire. Citizens lined the walls in silence, many weeping. They believed they were watching their king ride to his death and their kingdom's end. The march south to Ascalon was a test of endurance before any battle was fought. The distance was roughly 50 miles over rough roads, and Baldwin's small force had to cover it quickly before Saladin's scouts reported their movement. Rain fell in torrents, turning the roads into rivers of mud. Horses struggled. Equipment became waterlogged and heavy. Men marched in sodden misery. But the worst part was uncertainty. They didn't know exactly where Saladin's army was. how fast it was moving, whether they would reach Ascalon first or find it already under siege. For Baldwin personally, the march was agony beyond what healthy men could imagine. Leprosy had destroyed the nerves in his hands and feet, but paradoxically, this meant new injuries went unnoticed until infection set in. The constant friction of armor against his lesion-covered skin created wounds that bled and wept. The jolting of his horse sent spikes of pain through his deteriorating body. He coughed frequently, bringing up blood that he quietly spat into a cloth. His hands shook constantly, not from fear, but from disease-induced nerve damage. Yet he never showed weakness to his men. He rode at the column's head, spoke encouragingly to soldiers, and radiated a confidence he may not have felt.